Hi, friend. Niclas here. Welcome to another episode of the Your Audio Solutions podcast, where it's my mission to find the tools and methods from the people that inspire you so you can apply their knowledge to your own life and work. On the show today, we have Grammy Award winning producer, mixing and recording engineer Catherine Marks. She has worked with artists such as St Vincent, The Killers, The Wombats, Wolf Alice, and many other killer artists. And it was a real pleasure having Catherine on, and a lot of her stories she told in this interview, like the early days of struggling and how it is being an assistant engineer in studios for producers, engineers, etc. I love that I could relate to a lot actually, because I remember when I started out, and we talked about this more in the interview, but I remember the first year or something, starting out after school, basically. I remember just living week to week. It was like there's no gig. I don't have any money coming in, but it always was always one gig coming in each week that kept me just living on the breadline. It's very stressful, but Catherine has this experience too, and I'm sure if you are in the music industry, you have had this experience as well. It can be really stressful, obviously, but yeah, we talk more about that in the interview, and it was fascinating hearing Catherine's story and her journey through all this shit that we have to endure, basically. And I also love to hear if you have any experience like this, and please let me know in the comments if yeah, you have experienced the struggle living under breadline, just living gig to gig, basically, and just hoping something will come in. And yeah, please let me know in the comments. Love to hear your experience. And also, before we get into the interview with Catherine, I would love for you to check out the Audio Tribe email list. There's a link to that in the description below. Just enter your name and email address, and you have joined the Audio Tribe email list. And if you join, you get exclusive access to interviews before the public and much more stuff I like to do in the future, as we grow and grow. And yeah, please do that. It's free, obviously. And also feel free to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Just hit subscribe or hit the like button. I see a lot of people say hit the like button. Please do that if you want to. But yeah, please subscribe. And also please subscribe to Apple Podcast and Spotify or wherever you are listening to this podcast. We're growing steadily and steadily, and that's all thanks to you. So I really appreciate your support. It means we can get more killer guests on and do some more and more awesome stuff for you guys. So yeah, I really appreciate your help and support. But that's it. Let's get into the interview with Catherine Marks. So please enjoy.
How are you anyway?
Yeah, good. Thank you for taking your time. Obviously, really
Okay.
appreciate it. Yeah, that's good with Skype. Because I've been because people used to have Skype, and
Yeah.
then there's this new thing where you can just send a link and you should be able to join like a Zoom call. But yeah, sometimes it's a bit tricky. It seems like.
I find, the whole sort of thing of Zoom calls and stuff now, I never had to really do any last year, and this year I've had to do so many, and I find it so weird, but I feel a bit more used to it now. So
Yeah,
how,
exactly.
this is so brand new. What other views can you do with this? Like, how do I make it bigger and stuff?
Uh, I don't really know. I only have you like a small square like in front of me, so I can look at you ish, or it looks like I'm looking at you
Yeah,
straight to the
right.
camera. Yeah.
Um, okay, cool.
As long as
Yeah,
you can see and hear me, I guess that's all that matters.
I can you see and hear me as well?
Yeah, totally.
Okay,
Awesome.
great.
Uh, actually, I was listening to because I hadn't heard Saint Vincent before doing research about you, and I was just listening to the Mass Education, like the track.
Oh,
Um,
mass seduction.
oh, I thought it was Mass Education for some reason when I read it.
Yeah. No, it's mass seduction. I know.
Mass Seduction.
Yeah.
Well, sorry to Saint Vincent and to you.
Yeah, no, that's all right.
That was it was pretty badass, and so
Yeah.
it reminds me a lot of Muse. I don't know if that was ever a thought that came up working on it. Was it?
No, what the references weirdly that because when I was mixing it, there were the few songs that we were mixing together. My reference or the things that reminded me of were like early Kylie Minogue and Nine Inch Nails. That was
Oh
like
yeah.
I don't know why I thought of, because those are very sort of different references, but there was just something about it that kind of reminded me of that.
Hmm.
Like indie Kylie. I don't know if you're familiar with Kylie Minogue's
Yeah,
back,
yeah, yeah.
but
Definitely.
she went through a very indie phase, and then also sort of the like kind of electronics of Nine Inch Nails and the darkness of and depth of that
Hmm.
element of Nine Inch Nails. Yeah,
Are you a fan of Nine Inch Nails?
I am a massive fan of Nine Inch Nails.
Because I was talking to another Adam Getgood on the podcast a few weeks ago about
Mhm.
like metal music, like bands like Meshuggah, Periphery, like that's like bands I struggle listening to, and
Yeah.
also although Nine Inch Nails is not like that, but they also have some really dark stuff that I always also struggle listening to.
Really. There's a
Because
there's a few songs growing up that I remember, because I don't think when they came out that I was buying their records, but there was definitely songs that I was familiar with, and I actually saw them live at Reading, I think in 2009, and there was only like a few songs that I knew, but it was such an amazing performance. I mean, their songs are kind of incredible, and the production of them is so incredible. I found it really inspiring. And then Smashing Pumpkins played later, like after them, and I had always loved Smashing Pumpkins. I mean, they were like the some of those albums were the albums of my youth, and I was sort of a bit disappointed by that after the Nine Inch Nails show. Watching a show of a band whose music I wasn't as familiar with then, and then a band whose music I am familiar with, it was interesting.
yeah.
But yeah.
But so, which records of Nine Inch Nails do you like? Isn't there like one that is really dark? What's it called, like Downward Spiral?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, wasn't that where he went to like a cabin, thought about suicide, and made a record instead? Or am I
I'm
completely wrong?
sure. I'm not sure. I'll have to get back to you on that. Alan Moulder, who works in the building, he worked on a lot of those records. He's
Right.
a collaborator with Trent.
Right.
So I'll find out and ask him. One second, let's grab him some water.
Yeah. Yeah. No problem.
So whereabouts are you?
Well, we just moved to Leeds. I used to live in London too for 7 years.
Right.
But because of the pandemic, like so many people, it just sped up the whole process of moving out.
Yeah.
Uh, and now I mean, we are supposed to buy a house in Leeds, but so many complicated things with the flat in London selling and not being sold, like back and forth. So damn annoying. So now we're just in my partner's parents' house at the moment until
Right.
everything sorts out, so we can get our own place. Yeah, complicated.
I've lost so many friends who have moved out, and another really good friend has just sold her house, and she's moving to Cheshire, and it's so devastating not having kind of my mates around the corner. Not that I've been able to see them that regularly, but it's I understand, and living, having as I'm from Australia, not being able to go home, just everyone's just stuck at the moment, aren't they?
Yeah. So you haven't been able to go home at all since the pandemic? Hmm.
No, I
Are there
start.
any flights?
I mean, I looked. There are some flights, but they're very expensive and it's very tricky, and you have to quarantine for 2 weeks
Right.
when you get there. So it's also that, and then, I mean, throughout last year, I was I mean, I suppose that there were times when I could have, but then we were nervous about whether I could get back again,
Right.
not knowing if there were flights leaving Australia. You know, they kept sort of closing the borders, and um, so yeah. But I started looking at flights again last night, funnily enough.
Okay.
But very expensive, and I'm looking now at November this year. Then it looks like that's a possibility.
Wow.
Yeah, but there's some airlines who are not flying at all to Australia at the moment.
Okay.
So
Which
there's
ones?
I'm not sure, but there's just there is like they're only allowing a limited amount of people in per week or per
Oh,
month even. So you know they're reducing their flights to like 8% of what they would normally. So of course there's like loads of people trying to get back, and
right.
anyway I've come to terms with that.
Yeah, I mean that's hard. I mean, because I'm from Sweden,
Yeah.
although that's way closer than Australia, obviously. But yeah, I haven't been able to see my family for a while. I was able to go home in September last year, because they allowed me to go back. Oh, sorry, to go to Sweden and come back. But yeah, I mean, for you, it's even harder, obviously, because
Yeah.
it's Australia, and that's how many times are you able to go home? Really, is it a few times per year?
Yeah, normally, I mean, if I have a break, you know, sometimes I have like 2 weeks off in between projects, and I look at flights and they're cheap. I'll just fly back for a couple of weeks, even
Nice.
though I'm jet lagged for most of the time that I'm there. But I mean, having that freedom. I mean, it's the same for everyone. Having the freedom to be able to go somewhere
Hmm.
at the drop of the hat, not worrying about getting a PCR test or not worrying about having to quarantine or not worrying about having a vaccine or, any of these things. It's our freedom of movement was such a luxury in hindsight.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, can't wait for it to just be over so we can just
I
be
know.
normal again. I think hopefully it's not going to be weird going back to normal or whatever normal's going to be like. Because
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's sucks for everyone, which makes it maybe a bit easier somehow. It's not just a few people; it's everyone essentially.
Yeah. I mean, I think the mask wearing thing that will probably exist for a long time.
The what?
Wearing
Ah,
masks.
masks. Right, 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 right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, I read an announcement that Qantas, which is the Australian airline, they're not they're not anticipating to get back to kind of full international flights till 2023.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's crazy.
I know. So it's the impact I think will go on for a few more years, but
Definitely.
hopefully with the vaccines it'll be a bit better and we can start
Exactly.
live music again and
But that's
all
what
that.
we're seeing in New Zealand now, right? I don't know how it's in Australia, but like New Zealand had like a massive show a few weeks
They're
ago.
doing it in Australia as well.
Oh
They've,
yeah.
yeah. So there are some places who have done really well that with their borders closed, that everything is just as normal.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, hopefully that can happen here too.
I know.
Yeah,
I
we'll
know.
see.
Yeah.
But how? Because Australia, I never been to Australia. But that's also a country like it's just it's a country that has so many poisonous animals. You can just it feels like you can just not die every day, but it feels quite risky.
Um, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things there that can kill you, but
Hmm.
most people survive. It's
Yeah, I mean
nothing
for sure.
really nothing really to worry about.
But do you have to like? This might be such a stupid question, but do you ever find like snakes in your bed or in the toilet? Is that a common
No,
thing?
spiders though, lots of
Right,
spiders.
right.
There was one year where I can't remember whether it was unusually cold or unusually warm for whatever time of the year it was,
Hmm.
and my mum was in. They've got a house in the countryside in Victoria, and my mum was like, "Get upstairs. There's a big fucking spider on the ceiling," and we were all laughing downstairs, and my dad sort of got an ice cream bucket and put on a hat and we walked upstairs and Dad was sort of looking at his the ice cream bucket to collect the spider. He's like, oh my God, I'm going to need a bigger bucket, because the spider was like,
Wow.
it was almost like a crab spider. And then for the rest of that weekend, we just kept saying, like, we'd hear someone scream in the shower because a spider had dropped from the ceiling or something like that. It was,
Wow.
they can't hurt you. They're just, they're sort of more bird-eating spiders than like human-killing spiders. The little spiders are the ones that you have to worry about, because they can be quite
Yeah.
poisonous. Yeah.
Yeah, I know my mom back in the day, she went to Australia to work, she worked in this grape, we're picking grapes essentially. And she told me she got like a black widow on her hand. Because that's a really
Oh,
dangerous spider, obviously, and she just have to shoot it away. But if that story is true, yeah, I mean, yeah, like you said, the small spiders are the bad ones.
yeah. There's I think I found a white tail once in my bed, and white tails are potentially quite dangerous because the bacteria that they carry can sometimes like eat away at your skin.
Wow.
But I think I'd felt it in the, like, it was pitch black and I'd felt it and I'd like squashed it, or like, or maybe rolled over it, and then I turned on all the lights and I looked at it and I Googled it, and it was a white-tailed spider.
Shit.
But sometimes it's, I mean, you just grow up knowing these things, I guess.
Yeah, but did you say the big ones eat birds?
I think so.
That's crazy. I didn't know they can do that.
I mean, slowly. It's
Right,
not
right, right. It's not in a
like,
big gulp.
no.
No. That's funny. I mean, that's crazy. But so obviously you come from Melbourne, right? That's your hometown.
Yes.
Moving, was it first Dublin and then to London? Is that the journey?
I lived in Dublin for a year in 2001 while I was still studying architecture, and I did a year's placement at an architecture firm there. But that's kind of where I got the sort of the interest, I guess, in working in music. I mean, I'd always wanted to work in music, but didn't really understand what kind of roles you could have. I didn't know whether I wanted to be a singer or something. Not that I can sing, but I was lucky enough to be mixing with a crowd of people who were either in bands or producers or music engineers who were a lot older than I was, but I never really understood what a producer did or what an engineer did, but it always seemed like they were having lots of fun. And I was going to see a lot of live music, which I hadn't really done in Australia that much. The live sort of music scene in Melbourne, I think, started to take off in 2002. I mean, I know it existed, but I wasn't aware of it as much.
Right, right.
And then I went back to Australia and finished my degree and got my master's in architecture. And then I moved to London a few years later. So that was kind of the journey. But I wasn't doing music in Dublin. I just met a lot of musicians and music producers there.
Yeah. I mean, because I know you, like you said, I've seen in other interviews, you met the producer Flood, right?
Yes.
And he was telling you, yeah, go back, finish your degree, etc., etc. It's a big commitment and sacrifice. But how, because having worked in the music industry myself, I know what it takes, and I've seen, met people like yourself who are at a higher level. So what has your experience been when it comes to the sacrifices you have made, the commitment it has taken for you to do it at your level?
There was many years where I didn't really have a social life. It was quite isolating. Obviously not making a lot of money for a long time. I assisted for a while, and that can be sort of seemingly quite disheartening, I guess, because you know that, or I remember having a feeling of like, I want to be the producer. Why aren't I there yet? And resenting making tea. I went through phases of resenting making cups of tea, or doing the kind of what I at the time thought were kind of quite menial jobs. But there was a point where I think I started to understand that if I do these really menial tasks really well, maybe that will mean that they'll trust me to do other things and give me more responsibility. So while the sacrifice, financial, social, obviously moving away from home and not having, I didn't really know many people over here. There were a lot of Australian friends who I knew over here, but I was starting a completely new career from architecture, and starting at the bottom. And I knew no one else in the industry. I had no real I didn't know what was expected of me. I didn't know what it was to work in a recording studio. I didn't understand for a long time what it was. But I think when I sort of realized that by putting effort into the early stages, and I really enjoyed it and got a lot of satisfaction out of doing a really good job for the producers and the engineers that I was working for, I think I started to get a lot more out of it. And I was obviously soaking up a lot of, information and learning loads from them. And so I think the experience was beneficial, but definitely my recollection was the if I could be the best assistant ever and be the best support for whoever I was working with at the time, that would put me in good stead in the future. And also that the industry is so small and everything is about reputation. And it wasn't necessary. Once I understood it, it wasn't necessarily about me getting noticed. Like if a record label guy would come in or something, not making the situation about me, but just being a good tea maker or something, and producers talk and they would say, oh, that assistant's sort of really awesome. And then another producer would want me to assist on a project. And it kind of, it happened like that. Flood was singing my praises, and then I got to work with other amazing producers like Ben Hillier, and Danton Supple, Steve Osborne. Who else did I work with? Dimitri Tikovoy, Dave McCracken, all these producers, and then Alan Moulder eventually, and that was kind of, by that point I'd assisted for a lot of people and I felt I had a lot more confidence and I could contribute a lot more. But yeah, the main sacrifice was definitely no social life for a long time, because also back then the culture, it's very different now, obviously.
Is it? Right.
Yeah, I think the hours I was doing, especially in the first sort of 4 or 5 years, you could be expected to be in the studio for 14, 16 hours a day, sometimes 7 days a week.
But that was my experience too, actually. So
yeah. But I
So,
feel like, maybe it's because I'm the boss now, so I can dictate that. But it seems like, 10 or 12 hours is a good day in the studio. But also you have less time to do stuff too. So maybe we're becoming more efficient. I don't know. But it feels like the culture has shifted a lot.
Right. Oh, do you mean to working less?
Yeah, not working ridiculous hours. I think the expectation of the assistant is different as well, because culturally a lot has changed in the last 15 years.
Right.
Assistants were treated pretty badly, but I think that was part of the it was like being in the army. You had to be broken down to kind of be built up to make the perfect little soldier. So yeah, there were some times when it was quite brutal. We'd get we'd get yelled at or get ridiculed or made to do really stupid things for their amusement. But yeah.
If all those things are honestly just bullshit. It's just I don't know what the word is really, but it's just like a power thing,
Yes and no. I think, I mean, I would never behave in that way. I think it was it was, that's what I mean, that it was sort of part of the culture, it was part of the studio culture. You're
Mm-hmm.
spending a lot of time with people in a confined space. Um, and there's a lot of, personality dynamics going on, and a lot of psychology going on, and um, I think it's perhaps like a more of an old school kind of way of working, but the way you assert your dominance, I guess, like you're saying, that power sort of thing is by the way you treat your team, I guess, um, and it works with some artists, and it doesn't work with other artists.
Mm.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not thinking of anyone specifically when I'm saying this. But also the stories that I heard from a lot of my mentors about what they experienced when they were assisting.
Mm-hmm.
Sounded horrendous.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I've had that experience too, where I worked with someone who had also experienced really tough mentor, and now that person wanted to pass that really bad tradition along,
Yeah.
and I just don't understand it. I don't see like this. I have so many questions about why the music industry is why
I
it
mean,
is.
I agree with you. At the time, I mean, I cried a lot in the bathroom every day.
Yeah, yeah.
What am I doing wrong? But I think while it was horrendous to experience, and I resented it for many years, I think it has helped me become the kind of producer that I am, which in a way, when I'm working with artists, nothing is about me. Nothing, the artist can kind of experience, anger or fear or frustration, and I don't take it on. I guess it's this, I have, like, after years of being sort of punished emotionally, I guess, I now don't have that. I'm not so sensitive to about, I guess, the way someone might communicate with me, because I understand that they might be under a lot of pressure, or they're nervous, or worried, or so yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm, from a psychological point of view, I'm stronger for it.
But don't
But
you think there's other more
of course,
productive ways to do that?
of course, I'm trying to see the positive.
Right, right.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying, no, that absolutely should not be the way that, like,
No.
work is conducted. And that's what I mean. The culture has changed a lot. I think people are a lot more respectful. As I said, the expectations of assistants has changed. The dynamics have changed. I mean, especially now also with, like, things like, Me Too, and there are a lot of, like, cultural shifts, and there's ways that you just, 15 years ago, the way someone might have spoken to me, you would never get away with that now.
Right.
Um, and I think rightly so. But Alan and I were talking about it yesterday, actually. And I mean, when I worked with Alan, he's so respectful to his team. And so when you work with him, the artists know that you're part of his team, and so they treat you accordingly. And that, to me, was that was such a new experience, I guess, because I think you've just frozen. Have you frozen?
Hi.
Oh, I thought you'd just frozen for a second.
They were just so still.
Yeah, you were just really still. So we were talking about how we're looking for kind of new assistants at the moment, and we have very high expectations, as in, we kind of demand a kind of level of professionalism and attention to detail and initiative. But we're really struggling to find people who are kind of enthusiastic and willing to, and understand, like I said, like even just that basic level of, making a really good cup of tea and appreciating that, like, when you do something like that that's small, when you do that correctly, then you get more and more responsibility. But everyone seems to want to, like, jump into the big stuff straight away. But it is so much about trust. I mean, we can do all this stuff ourselves, but often we need help, because we're under pressure, or even just having someone sitting at the back of the room that you can say, what do you think about this? Do you prefer this snare drum sound or this snare drum sound, or something like that? But a lot of it is quite boring. Often there's not a lot to do, but having someone there to do snare triggers or something, or, prep sessions, it requires, we all have our own particular way of doing things, and it then takes time and energy to teach someone the way that we like things done. And then they seem not to be that interested. Right. So I'm finding that kind of frustrating. But the ones who do well, I mean, the other thing is, one thing I've noticed is, and a lot of other producers who I've spoken to, they've always found their very first experience as an assistant or a runner to be horrendous. And then the next one, because they've got a little bit more confidence, or they sort of know what to expect, always seems to go better, or the relationship is better. But all of this stuff is about trust. The whole industry is about trust and building trust, building those relationships, showing that you're kind of willing to do a good job. I mean, it's just basic common sense in life, really, isn't it?
But do you think, because, and I'm 100% sure you've experienced this too, but in my experience, I've seen there's, like, not talking about artists now, talking about, like, the people behind the scenes, like yourself, like producers, engineers, whatever, that there's so much pressure, that there's so much fear, there's so much fear of doing, maybe not a mistake per se, but there's so much fear of maybe losing. You mentioned the word reputation before, it's about building relationships. So everyone seems to be on such an edge that it's, I don't know, to me, I always struggle. I don't know how people can stay in that stressful mindset for so long, like for 12 hours a day. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I mean, maybe when I started producing, I was, God, so nervous, and I fucked up a few things because I wasn't experienced enough to deal with that kind of pressure. But I think just with experience, as long as you're a lovely person to work with, and you work hard, people are willing to kind of work with you. But also, not every situation is right for a producer artist match, or engineer artist, or engineer producer. It's again about trust and kind of chemistry. So sometimes and another thing that I have now learnt is, not every situation is right for me. So, and I'm very accepting of that, and also very understanding of that, and appreciative when I kind of spot that very early on, because there are always other opportunities. So some things don't work out. So you have to view it as not necessarily that you're failing, or that this will ruin your reputation, but as part of the learning experience. And what is kind of wonderful is all my mentors who've been doing it for now over 30 years, they still have that, like, really nervous, or does this mix sound right, or oh God, I still don't know how to use this bit of gear or something.
Right.
But it's that kind of desire to be better, which kind of pushes you, which then forces you to keep learning, which for me is the thing that keeps driving. Because otherwise, if I was sort of getting complacent, I'm sure it would mean that I was bored.
But I think the fear I'm talking about is actually the fear of making a mistake and then you think you lose your job because,
Oh, you mean as an assistant or as an engineer?
Yeah, exactly. As an engineer, or let's say an engineer working for a producer, or I guess a producer as well, being fired by a label because do you feel that pressure too? Like
I mean,
this fear of, oh, what if I do this wrong and then they're not gonna hire me, and then these other 10 labels will not hire me. because that's what I feel like I've seen in people, that is the fear that makes them sit there for 12 hours making sure everything's like perfect, you know.
I don't know. I mean, philosophically, that seems like a horrible way to exist.
Yeah.
Constantly live.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I think, I mean, when I was assisting, I fucked up all the time, but I always apologized and I never made the same mistake again. But I think, we're all human and not perfect. And if you do make a mistake, I mean, there were things that when I first started producing, even there was a situation where I really messed up because I felt like I was under so much pressure. But the record label was so understanding. I was still young, and and I still work with them now. Because it was a learning experience for all of us, how we all dealt with it. But yeah, I was essentially fired from a job.
Right.
But it wasn't like you're fired. It was more like we're going to go another way. So I lost out on doing a potentially really big record. But I also wasn't ready for it, and so I think that was sort of the right thing. But yeah, God, I mean, I blew bits of gear up because I put 240 into a 110 volt bit of kit, or dropped coffee on a keyboard, or there were
Right.
lots of things that I messed up at, but. And also partly because I was nervous and like so eager to do a good job. But you relax into it. I mean, I think it is about experience, really, and you learn how to deal with those situations. And as I said before, like even with the mix that I've been doing this week, it was such a wonderful opportunity, but I didn't know whether they would like what I did. And obviously I will work to make it so that they like it and to how they want it. But if I was told that I wasn't able to do any more, I would understand. I've given it a go, and and it was a lovely opportunity. But
Yeah. So
but
you
if it
wouldn't
was,
feel like life would be ending if that particular thing didn't work out. No, that's good.
yeah, and I think that's sort of the way to think about it, because it is, these things are about building relationships, and some relationships work and some don't.
Definitely.
That's how you should look at it. It's
Yeah.
not you, it's not them. It's just
Yeah.
create different.
Yeah.
For
Yeah. Yeah. It was very interesting. So yeah, thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. Because yes, I've been thinking about it a lot. Trying to make sense of it myself.
I think don't be fearful. Like be confident in what you can contribute. Be aware of like what you can learn, but understand that everyone's personality is different, and what you bring to it will be very different to what someone else might bring to it, or your approach might be different. The outcome might be the same, but the approach might be different, and you should definitely feel confident in what you are personally able to contribute. And it's also about collaboration. You alone can't be the sole kind of provider of all the answers and solutions. Like communicate and see if you're heading in the right direction, and it sort of be objective in a way as well. I mean, if you're working on your own music, it's harder to do that. But if you're working on someone else's, you should be able to be objective. Even though you're working on it, it's not essentially your work, it's someone else's.
Exactly. Yeah.
So while there's always going to be a little part of you that you put into it, if they don't like something that you've done, you need to figure out a way how to make it so that they do like it. And then that's again part of like the learning thing. And then you see something from a different point of view. And that's the sort of thing that kind of excites me.
Right. Awesome. But so when you get a mix, any mix, what do you have any specific questions you ask the person you're working for, like so you understand what they want? Do you have any specific questions that make it clear to you what they want?
Um, yeah, I mean, if I'm dealing with the artist, I'll always kind of discuss. what I've like garnered from the rough mix. And depending on who they are or the kind of relationship that I have with them, it'll be, sometimes it's also just getting to know them and like finding out what it is that they're looking for. But often the rough mix will be very close to kind of where they see it. And so I will just enhance that. If it's changing something creatively, then it's another discussion. But that I'll usually sort of get direction on that. But the mix I did this week, I just got sent it, or I'll speak to the engineer. But often I'm like, oh, the rough mix. There's something really amazing about the rough mix, and I'm constantly referencing that and trying to kind of bring that into the mix, to not lose something that is special about that, the immediacy of what a rough mix can have or a monitor mix can have. So yeah.
Right. Makes sense.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. I mean, yeah, rough mix, very important to understand what's going on, obviously.
Yeah.
But so when it comes to like dealing with payments, etc., because I had the producer Matt Wallace on a few weeks ago, who did Faith No More, for example. Also early Maroon 5 stuff. We were talking about payments and stuff, and he made an example of you not really making good money in the music industry because you're working twice as long as a normal worker, so essentially you can earn the same money working at McDonald's if you work the same hours as you do currently, and not you specifically, but just people in the industry.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about that, and how do you go about pricing yourself so you don't have to work 24 hours a day to make rent?
I have a manager who deals with all of that.
Right.
I mean, of course, I think there's always periods of time where I'm like, oh my God, I'm never going to work again and I'm never going to get paid. And I live alone. I've been saving up for a long time, just for rainy day things, like in case, I've got to pay tax or my boiler breaks down or something like that. So I tend to be quite frugal when I buy gear and things like that. But in terms of not even that luxury, as I said, like I had 10 years where I was struggling to pay rent. But then I started to make good money, maybe only even in the last 4 years or 5 years. So it's taken me a long time. I'm sure there are other people who get there much quicker. I was a bit slow, maybe. So, yeah, I mean, it's hard. I mean, that's the other thing about assisting these days. The pay is so, well, being anyone who's doing freelance work, even when it's not consistent, you don't know how much you're making per month. But again, I guess these were part of the sacrifices that I made, for all those years. Like my brother and I lived together he moved over here for a couple of years and we lived together in a 1-bedroom flat. He lived in the living room and I lived in the bedroom.
Right.
And we'd make bacon and egg muffins in the morning and sit on my bed and watch the Hollyoaks omnibus. I haven't thought about that for years. But we were miserable. But the Saturday mornings were like a nice thing. We were so miserable because neither of us had any money to go out. I had a lot of friends who were kind of working in like recruitment or advertising or, real normal jobs, properly paid jobs with salaries, and they would be able to go out and spend £50 on dinner or something, and that was so. I would say I'm sorry I can't go. There were sort of lots of situations that I couldn't participate in because I didn't have any money. But then little by little, I just started to get more work and getting more engineering work. And I don't know, it must be very hard.
But how did you learn about, knowing which rate you can set? Because I guess you didn't have a manager from day one.
No. Well, as an assistant, you were given what you were given, essentially.
Right.
I think for 3 years I earned about £50 a day,
Mm.
but I was working 7 days a week for a lot of that, and maybe I was making £350 a week,
Mm.
let's say, or maybe only 300. I don't know. Could have been 250. God, I was living on £250 a week. I was living on £250 a week for about 3 years. Then when I started to engineer, I would just say a rate. Like, I mean, I remember I got £450 one time, maybe about 10 years ago, £450 a day
Wow.
for engineering. But sometimes I would say, oh, we've only got 150, or there's no money. You know, you make a choice. But I think the standard rate, or I would investigate what the standard rate was. So like about maybe 150 to 250 pounds.
Mm.
But there was some projects where I could charge a bit more.
Right.
There was an album that I did which overran, and I ended up working a lot on it, and which would essentially have meant that I didn't get a summer holiday. And the label said, we'll give you whatever you want. So I said, I want £500 a day.
Wow. And they disagreed?
Yeah, they just agreed.
Perfect.
But yeah, they can only say no. I think, I mean, you know, as I said, there were lots of times where I didn't get, you know, so, I mean, 99% of the time I got not a lot of money. But when they said, what do you want? I told them. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
they can only come back and say, well, we've only got this much per day.
Yeah, yeah.
You can, and then you decide whether you want to do it or not.
Hmm.
But I mean, I was just saying yes to everything.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah, even if it was something that I didn't like, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I can completely relate to what you said about you and your brother sitting in your room, not being able to afford anything. Because yeah, I was like that the first few years too. It's like, I mean, I just made. I mean, there was always one job that came in that sort of saved me, but it was like £100, and
Yeah,
that was like what I paid for something. It was super stressful.
I know. There was, I think also, because I'd saved up a bit of money before I moved over here, and things seemed so much cheaper here because like, uh, obviously, like the value of the pound. So, you know, something for £300 seemed cheaper because in Australia it was $600, if that
Right,
makes sense. So like,
right.
and I just remember like I went through my savings so quickly because I was like, God, everything's so cheap.
Right. But it
But
wasn't.
yeah, living from sort of week to, I did have that. I did have the weekly. I knew that I was getting £250 a week for those first 3 years. So I guess I just managed, I made do with what I had.
Yeah, I mean those early years. I mean, you said maybe it took you longer, or whatever you want to compare it to, and that's something I was struggling with as well. Was like, why does it take so much longer for me to get somewhere than my friends, for example? And how do you deal with that? Did you find that stressful? Like, did you beat yourself down over it? No.
I remember saying to an engineer, why aren't I getting engineering jobs? And he said, because you're not ready.
Yeah.
In a way, he was kind of right.
Well, what did it mean? Like you weren't ready?
I wasn't ready for the responsibility. I didn't have enough experience. I think it's sort of all, for me personally anyway, it's all sort of happened in the right way, because then for every kind of big opportunity that I've had, I've been ready for that big opportunity and I've done well out of that opportunity. Whereas there've definitely been times when I would have, I've worked with some big artists, and had I not been confident at that particular time, that's a lot of money being put into a particular session if I fuck up. like what we were talking about before,
Mhm.
we all put a lot of pressure on ourselves. But I think that's what makes people great, when they want to do a good job. So maybe a little bit of fear isn't bad,
No,
because
definitely. Yeah, it makes you prepared at least,
yeah,
Yeah.
it shows that you care.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, but I think being prepared, yeah, definitely helps ease the fear. So yeah, definitely some fear is good. Yeah, I'm not going to say no to that. No. Because I'm like a person who tries to mitigate all fear. Because I don't want to, I just hate living being fear. And
Yeah,
I'm fearful a lot about stuff. So that's always something I try to eliminate. But yeah, some dose is not bad.
yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Before we wrap up, Catherine, do you have any like favorite failure that was a success in the end that set you up for success later on? It could be, doesn't have to be music related. It could be just normal life.
My favorite failure. There are so many, but I don't. As I think, like what we were talking about before, I never really saw them as failures, but as learning experiences. I mean, I'm sure they crushed me at the time. One, I mentioned it earlier, which was this album that I'd done an EP for a band, and one of the songs got got a lot of success from that EP. And I was set up to do the record for it, and I was under a lot of pressure. They were under a lot of pressure. I didn't handle it very well, and I mean, I still sort of have regrets about that. But it was so early on in my career. The label had given me a shot to produce the EP, and it was great that had worked out, and they really loved it. But it was unexpected the success that would have, um, which I think we were all very young and it put a lot of pressure on us. And I lost out on doing that record. But it's up until literally this exact moment, I've never thought, oh, how would my career be different? I think it it's built up my resilience and made me understand it. I learned so much from that, which was I should always listen to the artist and what the artist wants. And obviously the record labels and managers can have their input, but my job is to be on, to kind of support and facilitate what the artist is looking for.
Hmm.
But to include and be inclusive of the whole of the the team involved, not impose what other people might want onto a project. And yeah, I mean, it taught me how to deal with those situations so much, and I have a lot more confidence um, in that respect, I guess. So it was my biggest it's my biggest regret in my career, but it's also one of my favorite things to remember, that my career didn't end.
Yeah, 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 exactly.
It flourished. So
Yeah.
it's it was, and it taught me that sometimes I'm not the right person for a particular job.
Hmm.
Yeah, and that's okay.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's really, really good. If you don't mind me asking, also, I said that was last question, but this is a final question. uh, you said, trying to, or only not impose your own taste, for example. It was, you didn't use those words, but impose your own taste on an artist project. But how do you try to find the essence of the artist you're working with, if that makes sense? Again, do you have like specific questions you ask the people you work with to get the real thing out?
A lot a lot of production is about just talking, and getting to know the people that you're working with, understanding the chemistry and the dynamics of say if you're working with a band, understanding the dynamics of how the band work, how they relate to you, how you relate to them. Um, from a creative point of view, I love to talk about like imagery or where are we? What is this song about? What is this album about? How do we make this sort of a cohesive body of work? I like to talk about books or films that they like. Not necessarily like what music are you listening to, but like other things that are going on in their lives that have kind of contributed to this particular creative moment. And then, for example, if and I do this a lot in pre-production or just through phone calls, like even before we've kind of walked into the studio, a lot of this stuff is kind of already figured out. But in the studio, when we're recording, trying to capture a particular energy or emotion also requires like a discussion. But we've already kind of discussed and had it ingrained in our head what we're trying to kind of convey emotionally or from an energy, and hoping that then translates it through the speakers. So I guess, yeah, that's I mean, it's a lot of talking and discussing, but also just in maybe a little bit of intuition, or part of the reason I get a lot of work is because I hear the demos or whatever, and I can instantly sort of hear what it is that they're trying to achieve. And so through like the initial kind of meetings, I'm relaying to them how I'm interpreting what it is that they're doing, and I've either nailed it or I'm on the wrong track. So yeah, I mean, there's sort of a mutual understanding of what we're all trying to achieve initially. Yeah.
Right. That's really good. I mean, so it sounds like you're very intuitive, and they feel like, oh yeah, she knows what we mean. Perfect.
Yeah.
Let's hire her essentially.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think. Yeah. But sometimes I don't get it, and then I'm the wrong
Sure.
person. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's also good in the end. And
Yeah.
yeah. Well, it was a pleasure, Catherine. Yeah, I really enjoyed talking to you.
You thank you. That was very easy.
Say it again.
That was very easy. It's
Good.
like, yeah, it's nice chat.
Yeah. Exactly. That's trying to do, basically.
Oh, yes. No, thank you very much for having me and for thinking of me for this.
It was a pleasure, Catherine. And yeah, I look forward to hearing more music from you, obviously. And yeah, maybe can you let the listeners know where they can find like more info about you? Maybe hire you for projects and stuff.
My manager, Karen Ciccone, or Gravity Management. You can follow me on Instagram on CJ Marks. All the details are there as well. Yeah, the contact information is on my Instagram page.
Cool.
At
Awesome,
CJ.
Catherine.
Yeah. Call me if you need anything else as well, if you think of any other questions.
Yeah, definitely, man. Thanks again, and yeah, have a good day, and yeah, I'll speak to you soon then.
I'll speak to you soon. Have a lovely weekend, Niclas.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Catherine, for coming on. It was a real pleasure talking to you, and I hope you, the listener, enjoyed our conversation as well. Again, feel free to let me know in the comments if you have any similar experience to Catherine about the struggle about being an assistant, perhaps, or any experience you have working in the music industry. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Also, feel free to join the Audio Tribe email list. You get exclusive access to interviews before the public. And please subscribe to the YouTube channel, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We're growing by the day, and that's all thanks to you. So really appreciate that. But that's it for this week. We have some more killer interviews coming up in the upcoming weeks that I can't wait to share with you. But that's it. Pleasure to have you here as always. Take care and see you soon.